So horses leaving South Africa, obviously South Africa is an endemic horse sickness country.
Correct.
I've seen that the Barcelona Olympics apparently were affected by horse sickness years ago. They've had outbreaks in other parts. So they're very, very strict about us not
Correct. Yeah. So
sending that out into the world again.
many, many years ago, Spain did have an outbreak of horse sickness. And I'm going to think it was probably back in about 2019, maybe, yeah, maybe a little bit earlier. Thailand had a massive, massive
And I
outbreak
was
of
very
horse
interested
sickness.
to read about that. It had something to do with zebras.
So there was somebody from here, I have no idea who or whatever. They obviously a zoo in Thailand bought the zebras, and the zebras were shipped to Thailand, obviously with no testing or anything like that.
Oh dear.
And it was devastating. It was
Oh,
absolutely devastating. The horses were dying left, right, and center. They obviously have the midges and the ability for the disease to be transmitted. And now you've introduced horse sickness
Does
to.
anywhere else in the world vaccinate against horse sickness?
Obviously, our neighboring countries, Africa, it's African horse sickness. But in terms of Europe, they don't have the disease
They have zero
there.
protection if there is an
Dubai
outbreak.
has done some trials on it using a vaccine that they have created. And again, Europe they have the midge, which is why Europe is so scared to get it. I mean, you can imagine
No,
the
I mean the
devastation.
density of horses in Europe, it would
Yeah.
be a disaster. So obviously horses leaving South Africa, that's the biggest concern why our quarantine is so lengthy.
Correct. So the quarantine is not necessarily lengthy because of um, the African horse sickness itself. The problem and the reason our quarantine is so lengthy is we end up having to do two trades. It becomes a trade agreement between South Africa and Mauritius. That's your 21-day quarantine in South Africa to get to Mauritius. Then Europe will only do a trade agreement with Mauritian resident horses. And in order to become a Mauritian resident horse, you need to have completed 90 days in Mauritius. Therefore, they are
So
Mauritian.
technically Europe doesn't want South African horses at all.
Technically, Europe doesn't want South African horses
Okay.
at all at the moment. And then it's a 40-day quarantine from Mauritius onto Europe, which is what our old quarantine was. It was a 40-day quarantine in South Africa and then off to Europe. So the quarantine it's not that long, but Europe will only accept a Mauritian resident horse. So 50 days of your 90 days is starting to become a resident, and then you complete the balance of that 90 days.
I suppose it's two flights. It's more expensive.
It's two flights. It's more expensive. You're looking at probably. I don't do any shipments out via Mauritius. It's lengthy. I've looked at setting it up. It's expensive, and I just really didn't want to get into it. At that stage, it sounded like we were fairly close to opening again, and then we had another couple of cases of horse sickness in our surveillance and protected zone. And it went on for a little bit longer, but you're talking about putting in a couple of million rands worth of infrastructure onto somebody else's property to potentially ship however many horses a year.